She had been building a version of him in her mind for 3 years. Not him exactly. A him. The one she had decided he was going to be. Loyal, honest, consistent, the kind of man who showed up the way he said he would. Every time he failed to show up, she explained it away. He was busy, he was stressed, he was dealing with things she could not fully see. Every time the evidence contradicted the version she had built, she added a layer of interpretation that made the evidence fit. She was not stupid. She had a graduate degree, she ran a department of 40 people, she made clear-eyed decisions at work that people respected. But in this she was completely blind. Not to him. To herself. She was not in a relationship with a man. She was in a relationship with a story she had written about a man. And the man had never read the story. And the man had never agreed to play the character. He was simply being who he was. While she directed all her intelligence and emotional energy at preserving the version of him she had decided was real. The morning it ended, she sat in her kitchen and felt something she had not expected. Not grief. Clarity. Like a window that had been covered with frost suddenly becoming transparent. She saw the 3 years not as a love story that had failed, but as a 3-year project of self-deception that she had maintained against every piece of available evidence. And she understood that the relationship had never been the problem. She had been the problem. Specifically, her absolute refusal to see people as they actually were instead of as she needed them to be. Her name is Sarah, and she is not unusual. She is the rule, not the exception. Because idealizing people is not a romantic weakness or a personality flaw. It is a survival strategy that the human mind developed for very good reasons, and then kept using long past the point where it was helping. The Stoics had no patience for it. Not because they were harsh or unromantic or incapable of love and loyalty, but because they understood with devastating clarity that seeing people as they actually are is not cynicism. It is the foundation of every genuine relationship that has ever existed. And seeing people as you need them to be is not love. It is a prison you build for yourself, and then hand the other person the key without telling them. 7 lessons. 7 ways that idealizing people has been costing you things you cannot afford to keep losing. Each one is uncomfortable. All of them are true. Lesson 1: the person you idealized was always just a person. In 399 BC, the city of Athens put Socrates on trial. He was 70 years old. He had spent his adult life as the most celebrated philosopher in the ancient world. His students worshipped him. They had built a version of him in their minds that was almost superhuman. Supremely wise, immune to petty human concerns beyond the reach of fear or desire or the ordinary concerns of mortal life. And then Socrates stood trial. And his students watched something they had not prepared for. He was afraid. Not of death, which he discussed with remarkable philosophical composure, but of something more human than that. He was afraid of being misunderstood. The Apology, which Plato wrote as a record of his defense, contains moments of unmistakable vulnerability. A man desperate for the jury to understand what he had been doing with his life. A man who wanted to be seen correctly. A man who had human needs for recognition and understanding that his students had never quite allowed him to have because they had decided he was beyond all that. Plato, who idealized Socrates more than anyone, did something remarkable in his writing. He included those moments. He let Socrates be human. And what Plato seemed to understand even in his grief and admiration was that the real Socrates, the actual man who walked the streets of Athens and asked uncomfortable questions and occasionally got them wrong and had moments of doubt and needed people to understand him, was more interesting and more genuinely admirable than the idealized version his students had constructed. Because the idealized version had not actually accomplished anything. A perfect being who transcends human weakness is not inspiring. It is irrelevant. It lives in a category you cannot enter. The real Socrates, who was afraid and uncertain and still chose to stand by what he believed even when it cost him his life. That man is an invitation. That man says, this is possible for you too because I was only human. When you idealize someone, you remove them from the category of human achievement. You put them in the category of divine exception. And in doing so you rob yourself of the most useful thing they had to offer. The proof that an ordinary person in ordinary human conditions can choose extraordinarily. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this in a passage that surprises people who come to the Meditations expecting philosophical abstraction. He wrote about the great men who came before him with admiration and then immediately reminded himself that they were gone. That their greatness had not made them permanent. That they had been human. And that the humanity was the point, not the exception to it. See the people you admire as human, completely and without qualification. Not to diminish them. To make their example actually available to you. Lesson 2. What you call loyalty is sometimes just fear of being wrong. In 1957, a young senator from Massachusetts had a decision to make. He had spent months researching the history of American politicians who had stood on principle against popular opinion and paid the price. He had written a book about it called Profiles in Courage. It had won the Pulitzer Prize. It had made him famous as a man who understood and celebrated moral courage. And then the vote came. A civil rights vote. A vote that his constituents opposed. A vote that his political future in Massachusetts was contingent on opposing. And John F. Kennedy, who had just written a celebrated book about the courage to do the right thing regardless of political consequence, voted with his constituents. He voted against the civil rights measure. People who admired him were devastated. Not because they expected perfection. Because they had built a version of him that was the embodiment of what he had written. They had confused the book with a man. The man was a politician navigating the real constraints of political survival in a specific time and place. The book was a celebration of people who had done what he himself had not yet been tested on. The idealization had been sincere. And it had been wrong. Because the people who idealized Kennedy as the embodiment of political courage had not asked the most basic question available. Has he been tested yet? Do I actually know what he will do when the cost is real? The Stoics were precise about this distinction. They separated what people said from what people did. What people did in easy conditions from what people did when conditions were hard. What people claimed to be from what they demonstrated themselves to be under pressure. Epictetus told his students that the way to know a person was not to listen to their philosophy but to watch their choices. Not their choices when the choices cost nothing. Their choices when the choices cost something real. The person you have idealized. Have you watched their costly choices? Or have you built your image of them from their pleasant ones? Most idealization is built from the pleasant choices. The moments when being good costs nothing. The moments when the admirable thing and the self-interested thing happen to coincide. Those moments are data. But they are not the most revealing data. The most revealing data comes from the moments when they are afraid and tired and cornered and the self-interested thing and the admirable thing point in different directions. Has your idealized person been in that moment yet? And if they have, what did they do? Answer that question honestly. And your idealization either survives contact with reality, or it does not. But either way you will be seeing a person, not a projection. And that is where actual relationship becomes possible. Lesson 3. People show you who they are constantly, you just keep looking away. There was a Roman senator in the 1st century named Gaius who had a friend. The friend had borrowed money and not returned it. The friend had made promises and not kept them. The friend had been absent when Gaius needed support, and present only when the friend needed something in return. And Gaius kept lending him money, kept believing the promises, kept showing up for the friendship that was not a friendship. His advisor, who was a student of Stoic philosophy, finally said something to him that Gaius recorded in a letter that survived. The advisor said, "The man has told you who he is at least 15 times. When will you begin to listen?" That question is the whole of this lesson. People tell you who they are constantly. Not always in words. In the choices they make when the choices cost them something. In the way they treat people who cannot help them. In what they do with their time when they have freedom to choose. In whether their actions over time trend toward the person they claim to be or away from it. The information is always there. But idealization requires ignoring it. Requires explaining it away. requires adding layers of interpretation that transform evidence of who someone is into evidence of circumstances that prevented them from being who you decided they are. She is going through a difficult time. He has been under so much pressure lately. They are not usually like this. They have potential they have not fully expressed yet. These are the stories we tell. And some of them are sometimes true. But when the same story is required 6 months in a row to explain the same behavior, the story is no longer explaining an exception. The story is explaining the person. And the person is trying to tell you who they are. And you keep choosing not to hear it. Marcus Aurelius had a practice of what he called accurate seeing. He would look at situations and people and strip away the interpretive layer that his preferences and fears and needs had placed over them. He would ask what is actually here. Not what do I want to be here. Not what would be most convenient to be here. What is actually here. And then he would respond to what was actually there. Not to what he wished were there. That practice is one of the most uncomfortable disciplines in the Stoic tradition. Because accurate seeing sometimes shows you things you would rather not see. About the people you love. About the choices they are making. About the distance between who they told you they were and who they are demonstrating themselves to be. But the discomfort of seeing clearly is always less costly than the damage of sustained blindness. Sarah in her kitchen that morning was experiencing the clearing. 3 years of looking away. And then 1 morning of seeing. The seeing hurt. But it was the first morning in 3 years that she was looking at something real. Lesson 4: the pedestal is a prison for both of you. In the 1960s, a young woman named Sylvia was in love with a man she had decided was a genius. His name was Ted and he was a poet of genuine talent. But the version of Ted that Sylvia Plath had constructed in her mind was not a talented poet. It was something closer to a divine figure. A man of such extraordinary gifts, and such complete understanding of her own complex interior life that she had built her sense of her own worth around his recognition of it. She needed him to see her. Because she had decided that his seeing her was proof of what she was. When he was cruel and absent and unfaithful and revealed himself to be as limited and as broken in his own ways as any ordinary human being. The collapse was not just of the relationship. It was of the entire structure she had built her identity inside. Because the pedestal she had built for him was not just the place she had put him. It was the foundation of the building she lived in. When the pedestal fell, the building fell with it. This is what no one tells you about idealizing people. It is not just dangerous to you when they fail you. It is dangerous to them while they are still trying to live up to it. Ted Hughes spoke about this later in his career with a directness that was painful to read. He described the weight of being the person Sylvia needed him to be. The impossibility of being that person. Not because he was a bad man. Because the person she needed him to be did not exist. It had never existed. She had made him. And he had tried to live inside the construction. And the construction had not fit a real human being. Because it had not been built for one. When you put someone on a pedestal, you remove their permission to be human. You remove their permission to be afraid to fail, to be wrong, to need something from you, to be less than your ideal on a given day. And they will sense this even if it is never spoken. And one of two things will happen. They will exhaust themselves trying to remain what you need them to be. Or they will eventually fail the standard simply by being themselves. And you will experience that failure as betrayal. When it was never betrayal. It was just a person. Being a person. In a situation that did not allow for that. The Stoics were unsparing about this. Epictetus said that the person who ties their peace to another person's perfection has tied themselves to a condition that will never be permanently met. Because no person is permanently perfect. And so the peace will never be permanent. Remove the pedestal. Not the person. The pedestal. Let them be human. And discover what is actually there when you stop requiring them to be more than that. You may find it is less than what you imagined. You may find it is something better. Something you could not have seen through the distortion of what you were requiring them to be. Lesson 5: idealizing people is usually a way of avoiding yourself. In the early 20th century, a young man from Austria arrived in Vienna determined to study art. He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts twice, He was rejected twice. The rejection devastated him. Not just practically, existentially. Because he had decided that his destiny was to be an artist, and the rejection felt like a verdict on who he was, not just what he had produced. And in the years that followed, rather than examining himself honestly, rather than asking what the rejection was telling him about the gap between his current abilities and his aspirations, he began looking outward for explanations. He began building versions of people who could be blamed for what had not happened for him. He built idealized versions of a past he had not personally experienced, and distorted versions of present people who he decided were responsible for his situation. His name was Adolf Hitler, and the tragedy of his life before it became the catastrophe of the century was this. He was a person who could not look at himself honestly, could not face the gap between who he was and who he wanted to be, could not tolerate the ordinary human experience of failing and revising and trying again. And so he turned outward. He found a story in which others were responsible for everything he was not. And he made that story into one of the most destructive forces the world has ever seen. This is an extreme example, the most extreme available. But the mechanism it illustrates is entirely ordinary. Because most people who idealize others and most people who demonize others are doing the same thing. They are looking outward to avoid looking inward. They are managing the discomfort of an honest self-examination by organizing their attention around someone else. The idealization is the pleasant version of this. It says this person is so extraordinary that understanding them fully is the most important project available. And while you are busy understanding them fully, you do not have to ask the uncomfortable questions about yourself. What am I actually good at, and what am I not? Where have I been the problem in situations I blamed on others? What am I afraid of that I have been converting into a story about what other people are failing to give me? What version of myself am I protecting from examination by keeping my attention on someone else? These questions are not comfortable, but they are the questions that produce an actual life. Seneca wrote about this with his characteristic directness. Examine yourself, he told Lucilius, before you examine anyone else. Before you form a judgment about another person, ask whether you have formed an honest judgment about yourself. Because the person who has examined themselves honestly will find that they have less time and energy for the idealization of others. They are too busy with the real project. The ongoing, demanding, never-finished work of becoming who they actually want to be. Lesson 6: Accurate expectations are not cynicism, they are freedom. In 121 AD, the Roman Emperor Hadrian made a decision that puzzled the people around him. He was at the height of his power. He had consolidated an empire that stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia. He could have continued expanding in the tradition of every Roman emperor before him. Instead, he drew borders. Literal physical borders. Hadrian's wall in Britain is still standing. He was not retreating from weakness. He was operating from accurate assessment. He had looked at the empire's actual capacity and asked not how far can we reach in a moment of maximum ambition, but how far can we sustainably hold. He had separated what was possible in a burst of effort from what was possible across decades of consistent management. And he had built to the sustainable line, not to the aspirational one. His advisors thought he was being pessimistic. History decided he was being wise. Because the borders he drew held for generations, while the overextensions of more ambitious emperors collapsed under their own weight. This is what accurate expectation actually is. Not the decision to want less than you are capable of. The decision to align your commitments with what can actually be sustained rather than what sounds best in the moment of maximum enthusiasm. The same principle applies directly to how you see people. The person who idealized their partner and then experienced the collapse of the idealization does not need lower standards. They need accurate ones. Standards that match what an actual human being is capable of consistently delivering. Not what a perfect version of that person would deliver on their best day. What this specific human being, with this specific history and these specific limitations, and this specific capacity for growth, is actually capable of. The Stoic practice here is ruthlessly practical. You ask not what do I want this person to be, but what have they shown me they are capable of consistently. Not their ceiling. Their floor. Their consistent demonstrated behavior across time and varying conditions. And then you decide whether what they consistently are is something you can build a real relationship around. Not a fantasized relationship. A real one. Between two actual people, neither of whom is the idealized version. Marcus Aurelius expected the people around him to be difficult. Not because he had contempt for humanity. Because he had studied it honestly, and he knew that difficult is what human beings often are. And by expecting it, he was never ambushed by it. The difficult behavior arrived, and he was already prepared. He had already decided how a person of his values would respond. He had not been blindsided by the revelation that the person was human. He already knew they were human. He had built his relationship with them on that foundation. And foundations built on accurate ground do not collapse when it rains. Lesson 7: The day you see clearly, everything becomes possible. In 1955, a woman named Rosa sat in a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and refused to move. What most people do not know about that moment is that Rosa Parks was not acting on impulse. She was not acting from a spontaneous explosion of exhaustion with injustice. She had spent years in deliberate preparation. She had attended the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee. She had studied the philosophy and strategy of nonviolent resistance. She had read deeply about Gandhi's campaigns in India. She had examined herself honestly about what she was afraid of, and what she was capable of, and what she was willing to risk. She had looked at the people around her with clear eyes and seen not only their failures and their complicity, but also their latent capacity for something better. She had looked at the people in power with clear eyes and seen not invincible authority, but a system that depended on her cooperation. And when she saw that clearly, when she stripped away every layer of idealization and fear and resigned acceptance that had accumulated over decades of living inside that system, she saw that the system was not permanent. It was only as permanent as the people inside it allowed it to be. That clarity did not make the action safe. She was arrested. She was fired from her job. She received death threats for years afterward. But the action was possible. Because she was operating from clear sight. Not from the idealized vision of a world that would automatically recognize and reward her courage. Not from the idealized version of the people around her who she hoped would rally to her side. From accurate, clear, honest seeing of what was actually there. And what was actually there when you looked at it without the distortion of either fear or false hope, was a situation that one person choosing to see it clearly could change. This is the final lesson. And it is the one that contains the whole promise of everything that comes before it. Seeing people as they actually are. Removing the idealization. Removing the projection. Removing the story you have been telling yourself about who they are and who you need them to be. That seeing is not the end of relationship. It is the beginning of actual relationship. The relationship between two real people. Neither of whom is a construction. Both of whom can actually be known. And both of whom can surprise you. Not by being what you required, but by being something you could not have anticipated. Because you were never looking at them closely enough to see what was actually there. Sarah sat in her kitchen that morning and felt the clarity arrive. And after the grief of it, after the honest acknowledgement of 3 years spent in a relationship with a version of a person rather than a person, she felt something that surprised her. Relief. The weight of maintaining the story had been enormous. She had not known how enormous until she put it down. The energy she had been spending on the project of seeing him as she needed to see him was energy she had not had available for anything else, including herself. Including the honest examination of what she actually wanted. What she was actually capable of. What kind of relationship was actually available to her if she stopped requiring it to match the version she had written. The day she stopped idealizing him was the day she started seeing herself clearly. And the day she started seeing herself clearly was the day everything became possible. The Stoics were not asking you to become cold. They were not asking you to stop loving people or trusting people or giving people the benefit of the doubt. They were asking you to love the actual person. Trust the demonstrated person. Give the benefit of the doubt to what you can actually see. not to the story you have written over what you can see. Because the story costs you. Every time you maintain it against the evidence it costs you. Energy, clarity, time, the honest self-examination that produces actual growth. And it costs the person you are idealizing. The permission to be human in your presence. The freedom to fail without losing your love. The ability to actually be known rather than performed for. Marcus Aurelius spent 20 years governing the most powerful empire in the ancient world. He wrote in his private journals about the people around him with a clarity that makes modern readers sometimes uncomfortable. He did not idealize them. He saw them. He saw their pettiness and their ambition and their fear and their self-interest and their capacity for both ordinary cruelty and unexpected generosity. And he loved them anyway. Not the version of them he wished existed. The version that was actually there. That love based on accurate seeing was more durable and more genuine than any idealization could have been. Because it was not contingent on them being something they were not. It was built on what they actually were. On the full human complexity of them, including the parts that were not easy to love. That is what the Stoics were pointing at. Not less love. Real love. Not lower standards. Accurate ones. Not cynicism. The specific kind of freedom that arrives when you stop requiring the world to match your construction of it, and start engaging with what is actually there. The day you stop idealizing people is not the day you lose your faith in humanity. It is the day you find out what humanity actually is, and discover that the real thing, with all its imperfection and inconsistency and surprising grace, is worth far more than the version you were protecting in your mind. See clearly. The view from there is better than you think. Please subscribe for more. He had been planning to write the novel for 11 years. He had talked about it at dinner parties and family gatherings and on first dates, and in late-night conversations with friends who genuinely believed in him. He had notebooks filled with ideas. Character sketches, character arcs, plot outlines, thematic notes, research documents spanning hundreds of pages. He had a dedicated writing desk, a specific brand of pen he preferred, a playlist he had curated specifically for the creative mood he was trying to cultivate. He had read 47 books on the craft of writing. He had taken 2 online courses. He had joined and left 3 writing groups. He had announced the project to so many people for so long that it had begun to feel like something he had already done. And then one afternoon his friend asked him a simple question. How many pages have you actually written? He sat with that question for a long time. The answer was 11. 11 pages in 11 years. All the talking, all the planning, all the thinking, all the mood setting and research and discussion and announcement had produced 11 pages. While he had been preparing to write the novel, he had not been writing the novel. His name was Arthur, and he is not a fictional character, he is a version of almost every human being alive. Because almost everyone is Arthur. Almost everyone has something they have been meaning to do, thinking about doing, talking about doing for so long that the talking and the thinking have started to feel indistinguishable from the doing. They have not started the business, they have been meaning to start the business. They have not had the conversation, they have been planning to have the conversation. They have not built the thing, they have been waiting for the right conditions to build the thing. And the right conditions never fully arrive because conditions are not what was actually missing. What was missing was the decision to stop and do. Marcus Aurelius understood this problem at the deepest level, and he understood it not as an outside observer but as someone who wrestled with it himself. He was the most powerful man in the ancient world, and he spent his private journals writing reminders to himself. Stop talking, start doing. Stop planning, start acting. Stop overthinking, start executing. He called it one of the central disciplines of the philosophical life, the ability to bring your energy to a point to narrow everything down to the one thing that is actually in front of you and give it everything you have. That is what this is about. Not productivity hacks, not morning routines, not the performance of discipline. The real thing, the hard thing, the thing that most people circle for their entire lives without ever landing on it. True strength is not loud, it does not announce itself, it does not require an audience, it does not need to be discussed or explained or understood by anyone other than the person practicing it. True strength is the man who sits down and writes the next page. The woman who makes the call instead of rehearsing it. The person who does the work instead of talking about the work. Stop talking, stop overthinking, start focusing. Here is how. Part 1. The cost of constant talking. There was a general in the Peloponnesian War named Nicias who history remembers for one catastrophic decision. In 415 BC, Athens launched one of the largest military expeditions in its history, a massive naval assault on Syracuse in Sicily. Nicias was one of the commanders. He did not want to go. He had argued against the expedition. He thought it was overambitious. He thought the risks were too great. He thought Athens was overextending itself. And he was right. But here is the part of the story that gets left out. Nicias had been warned before the fleet sailed, before the men shipped out, before the entire operation was committed. There was a window where honest counsel might have changed everything. Nicias talked about his reservations to his colleagues at dinner. He mentioned his doubts in private conversations. He expressed his concerns in the measured diplomatic language of a man who did not want to be seen as obstructing the popular will. He never said the true thing clearly. He never stood up in front of the assembly and said, "This will fail, and here is exactly why, and I will not put my name to it." Instead, he hedged, he qualified, he softened, he talked around the thing he actually believed. The expedition sailed. It was a disaster of historic proportions. The Athenian fleet was destroyed, the army was annihilated, Nicias himself was captured and executed. And the tragedy is that Nicias knew. He knew before the first ship left the harbor. But he had spent so long talking carefully and diplomatically and strategically that he had lost the ability to simply say the true thing with full force and let the consequences be what they were. This is one of the hidden costs of excessive talking that almost no one discusses. When you talk too much, you do not just waste time and energy. You erode your own clarity. You begin to hear yourself say things and confuse the saying with the knowing. You rehearse positions so many times that you lose the ability to tell the difference between what you actually believe and what you have gotten used to saying. Seneca saw this clearly and wrote about it with his characteristic sharpness. Retire into yourself as much as you can, he told his friend Lucilius. Associate with those who are likely to improve you. Welcome those you are capable of improving. The process is mutual, for people learn while they teach. But notice what comes first. Retirement, withdrawal from the noise. Because Seneca understood that wisdom does not come from the conversation, it comes from the interior, and you cannot access the interior when you are always projecting outward. There is something specific that happens in the brain when we talk about our intentions. Psychologists call it social reality. In experiments, when people tell others about their goals, their brains register a small reward similar to what the brain experiences when the goal is actually achieved. Which means that talking about the thing you want to do gives you a hit of the satisfaction normally reserved for doing the thing. And that satisfaction reduces your drive to actually do it. Every time Arthur told someone about his novel, he got a little bit of the feeling of having written the novel without writing a single word. Multiply that across 11 years and thousands of conversations, and you begin to understand why the page count never moved. The Stoic practice is silence not as absence but as discipline. It is the decision to give your words only to what has been earned through action. To describe what you have done, not what you intend to do. To speak less and mean more. To let the work speak first and add words only when the work cannot speak for itself. This is not about being cold or withholding or mysterious. It is about understanding that your energy is finite and that every unit of it spent on announcement is a unit not available for execution. The question Marcus Aurelius kept returning to in his private journals was this: what am I actually doing? Not what am I planning, not what am I preparing, not what do I intend. What am I actually doing? That question has a way of cutting through everything. Part 2. What overthinking actually costs you. In 1879, a young law student in London named Mohandas had to deliver his first speech. He stood at a vegetarian society meeting in front of a small and entirely sympathetic audience of people who agreed with everything he was about to say. And he froze. Not from ignorance, he had prepared extensively, he knew his subject, he had his notes in front of him. But when he opened his mouth to speak, he felt what he later described as his heart sinking into my boots. He read the first sentence from his notes. Then the next. Then he asked someone else to finish reading on his behalf and sat down. He was mortified. This was Mahatma Gandhi, one of the most effective communicators of the 20th century, a man whose words would eventually move hundreds of millions of people to action. And in 1879 he could not get through a 2-minute speech to a room of 20 sympathetic vegetarians because he was so deep inside his own head that his own thoughts had become a trap. He wrote about that evening decades later with remarkable honesty. He said that the problem was not lack of preparation. The problem was too much thinking about the thinking. He had been so focused on how he was coming across, on whether his words were landing on what people were thinking of him, that he had completely lost access to the thing he actually wanted to say. Overthinking is not thinking more clearly. It is the opposite of thinking clearly. It is thinking that has turned back on itself so many times that it has become its own obstacle. The Stoics had a precise understanding of this phenomenon. They called it the tyranny of impressions. An impression is the automatic response your mind gives to a situation before you have applied reason to it. The untrained mind is governed entirely by impressions. Something happens and the impression arrives, and the untrained person simply follows it wherever it goes. An insult arrives and the impression is anger, and the untrained person is angry immediately, fully, without any gap between stimulus and response. An opportunity arrives and the impression is fear, and the untrained person retreats immediately, fully convinced that the fear is the same as the danger. Overthinking is what happens when you try to manage impressions without the Stoic training to simply observe them and choose. You get the impression of fear around the difficult task. Then you start thinking about the fear. Then you start thinking about why you are afraid. Then you start thinking about whether the fear means something about your character. Then you start thinking about whether other people feel this way or whether something is wrong with you. Then you start thinking about everything you have attempted before that did not work. And by the time this loop has completed 4 or 5 times, the afternoon is gone, and the difficult task remains untouched, and you feel simultaneously exhausted and guilty, and not quite sure what you spent the last 4 hours doing. Marcus Aurelius described the alternative in one of the most practically useful passages in his entire journal. Confine yourself to the present, he wrote. Not to what you did yesterday, not to what might happen tomorrow, not to what people might think, not to what could go wrong, not to the entire architecture of possibility and consequence your mind can construct around any given action. To the present. To the task. To what is actually in front of you right now. This sounds simple, it is genuinely difficult. Because the mind does not want to be confined to the present. The mind wants to roam, it wants to protect, it wants to anticipate, it wants to process and reprocess and anticipate and prepare for every contingency until it feels safe. And the mind never quite feels safe enough to begin. Which is why beginning has to happen before the mind is ready. Gandhi discovered this. After that humiliating first speech in London, he made a decision that changed his life. He stopped trying to prepare until he felt confident. He started speaking before he felt ready. Not recklessly, not without preparation, but without waiting for the fear to resolve itself before he acted. He joined a debating club and forced himself to speak at every session whether he had anything good to say or not. He wrote letters to newspapers and sent them before he could talk himself out of it. He practiced saying the true thing directly without first passing it through the filter of what might be the safest version of it. And over time the overthinking loosened its grip. Not because he stopped being afraid, but because he had learned through direct repeated experience that the fear was not the same as the reality. The work was survivable. The beginning was always the worst part, and it was survivable. And once he knew that in his body, not just his mind, he was free. Part 3. The Discipline of Singular Focus. In 1962, a young jazz musician in New York was struggling. He was talented, everyone in his circle knew it, he could play, he had technical command, he understood harmony in ways that most musicians his age did not. But he was scattered. He was trying to develop his own voice while simultaneously absorbing every influence he admired, while simultaneously working to master 3 different instruments, while simultaneously studying composition, while simultaneously gigging to pay rent, while simultaneously maintaining a social life in the jazz community that he felt was important to his development. He was doing all of it, and excelling at none of it. His name was Herbie Hancock. One evening he was playing a gig with Miles Davis. Miles was at that point the most important figure in jazz, perhaps in all of American music. In the middle of a performance, Herbie played a chord that he immediately knew was wrong. It was a chord that did not fit, it clashed with what Miles was doing, it disrupted the structure of the piece. Herbie felt the blood drain from his face. He was playing with Miles Davis in front of an audience, and he had just played the wrong chord. And then he watched something happen that he never forgot for the rest of his life. Miles heard the wrong chord, paused for one beat, and then played a phrase that made Herbie's chord sound like it was exactly right. Like it had been the intended note all along. Like the dissonance had been the point. After the gig, Herbie asked Miles how he had done that. Miles looked at him and said, "There are no wrong notes." What he meant was not that anything goes in music. What he meant was that he was so completely inside the present moment of the music, so fully committed to what was happening right now, that he could take whatever came and make it into something. He was not planning ahead while he played, he was not protecting his reputation while he played, he was not managing impressions or thinking about what the critics would say. He was just completely there, completely focused. And from that place of complete focus, almost anything could be turned into something. Herbie Hancock never forgot that lesson. He later said it changed not just how he played music, but how he approached everything. It taught him that scattered attention does not produce excellent work. That you cannot do 5 things at the full capacity that one thing demands. That singular focus is not a luxury for people who have simple lives. It is the prerequisite for doing anything at the level it deserves to be done. The Stoics called this faculty prosok. Attention to the present moment, total engagement with what is actually happening right now, bringing the whole of your consciousness to bear on the single thing that deserves it. Marcus Aurelius practiced it in the most demanding possible context. He was the emperor of Rome. He was managing wars and politics and an empire of millions of people and philosophical self-examination all simultaneously. And yet the meditations are full of reminders he wrote to himself about doing one thing at a time. Nowhere in the meditations does he describe trying to hold 3 problems in his mind at once. He describes going to the thing in front of him, addressing it fully, completing it, moving to the next. This is not natural for most people. Most people have convinced themselves that the ability to hold many things in attention simultaneously is a sign of intelligence or capability. It is not. Neuroscience is unambiguous on this point. The human brain does not actually multitask. What it does is switch rapidly between tasks. Each switch costs something in cognitive resources. Each switch takes a small amount of time to re-engage fully with the new task. A person who believes they are doing 5 things at once is actually doing 5 things badly in rapid rotation. What Herbie learned from Miles. What Marcus practiced in the meditations. What every person who has ever produced extraordinary work has eventually discovered is this. You have to choose. Not out of limitation but out of wisdom. You have to give the thing in front of you what it actually requires. And what it actually requires is all of you. Part 4. Silence as Power. There was a Quaker businessman in 18th century Philadelphia named John Woolman who became one of the most effective abolitionists in American history without ever raising his voice. He did not give fiery speeches. He did not write inflammatory pamphlets. He did not build coalitions or mount campaigns or organize boycotts. What he did was visit people. He would travel to the homes of fellow Quakers who owned enslaved people, and he would sit with them, quietly. He would ask simple questions. How do you feel when you consider what you are doing to these people? What do you believe about the souls of those you hold in bondage? What does your conscience tell you in the quiet hours before dawn? And then he would stop talking and wait. In the silence that followed his questions, John Woolman let people hear themselves. He did not argue, he did not lecture, he did not overwhelm with evidence. He created space for the truth that was already present in the room to become audible. Over the course of decades, traveling this way, quietly visiting, speaking carefully, and then falling silent, John Woolman persuaded more Quaker slaveholders to free the people they held than anyone who came before him. By the time of the American Revolution, the Quaker community had almost entirely eliminated slaveholding from within its own membership. decades before abolition became a mainstream political movement. One quiet man talking less and trusting silence more had moved an entire community. Seneca wrote about the nature of this kind of power with unusual clarity. He made the observation that the person who speaks constantly is revealing something about themselves. They are afraid of silence. They are afraid that if they stop talking, the room will lose interest. They are afraid that their value is contingent on their output of words. And that fear makes them easy to read and easy to dismiss. The person who speaks rarely and carefully is revealing something entirely different. They are revealing that they do not need the room. That they are not performing for the room. That when they speak, it is because they have something to say, not because they are afraid of what the silence might mean. That quality creates a specific kind of attention in other people. When someone speaks all the time, you stop fully listening. You know more words are coming, you let the current ones wash over you while you wait for something that feels important. When someone speaks rarely, you listen immediately. Because you have learned that when they open their mouth, something real is about to happen. That is the economy of attention that silence creates. Marcus Aurelius had a word for the ideal quality of speech. He called it directness. Say the thing you mean completely clearly, without decoration, without the protection of ambiguity. And then stop. Do not add the softening phrase that makes you feel safer. Do not hedge. Do not circle back to clarify in ways that undermine the clarity you just achieved. Say it. Stop. The silence after a direct true statement is not empty. It is the space where the statement lands and takes root. Taking that silence away by filling it with more words is one of the most common and most costly communication mistakes people make. John Woolman knew this instinctively. He let the silence work. And the silence worked better than any argument he could have made. Part 5. Stop performing strength, start embodying it. In the 1930s, there was a boxer from Detroit named Joe who grew up in poverty, who had experienced racism in forms that would have broken most people, and who became perhaps the greatest heavyweight boxer of his era. Joe Louis. What most people remember about Joe Louis is his record, his championship reigns, his devastating punching power. What fewer people talk about is how he carried himself. He did not trash talk before fights. He did not produce theatrical pre-fight spectacles. He did not perform confidence for the cameras. He showed up. He trained with a focus that his training partners described as frightening. He worked on his weaknesses with a relentlessness that was unusual, even among elite fighters. He answered questions from reporters in short, direct sentences and declined to expand when expansion was not necessary. He fought. And then he won. Often quietly, decisively, without drama. There is a story from one of his training camps that one of his sparring partners later told. He said that what scared him most about training with Joe Louis was not the power of the punches. It was the silence. Joe Louis would come to the gym in the morning and go to work, and the only sounds were the sounds of training. Not conversation, not commentary, not self-narration, not the performance of toughness that most fighters put on for the room. Just the work. Pure, undistracted, committed, entirely unhurried work. His trainer Jack Blackburn said that Joe Louis was the most focused athlete he had ever been around in his life. Not because he tried hard. Because he had stopped trying to look like he was trying hard. He had eliminated everything between himself and the work. The Stoics had a specific contempt for what they called external goods. Fame, recognition, status, the opinion of the crowd. Not because those things are evil, but because the person who is performing for them has made a fundamental error about where strength actually comes from. Strength does not come from being seen as strong. Strength comes from the practice that produces strength, and that practice requires giving all your attention to the practice, and none of it to managing how the practice is being received. Epictetus, who was enslaved and therefore had perhaps the clearest view of anyone in the Stoic tradition of what real power looks like versus what performed power looks like, was unsparing about this. He said that the person who boasts of strength has already revealed weakness. Because the person who actually possesses strength does not need to announce it. The announcement is a substitute for the thing itself. Marcus Aurelius wrote one of his most famous passages about exactly this distinction. Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect, he wrote. You could follow the argument to its natural end. Never perform anything as a substitute for being the thing. Never talk about strength as a substitute for practicing it. Never announce a result as a substitute for producing it. Joe Louis did not say he was the greatest. He was the greatest. Those are completely different projects, and only one of them requires focus. Part 6. The Philosophy of Less. In 1845, a young man from Concord, Massachusetts walked into the woods near Walden Pond and built himself a small cabin. He was 27 years old, he had a Harvard education, he had prospects, he had options. And he chose to reduce. Deliberately, consciously, as a philosophical experiment. His name was Henry David Thoreau, and for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days he lived in that cabin alone, working a small garden, reading, writing, and observing with careful attention the nature of his own experience. He was not escaping, he was clarifying. He wrote later that he went to the woods because he wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die discover that I had not lived. The essential facts of life. That phrase is the key. Thoreau had noticed something that disturbed him about the world around him. That most people were spending the bulk of their life energy maintaining a complexity they had not consciously chosen. More possessions meant more maintenance, more social obligations meant more management, more ambitions meant more anxiety, more commitments meant less presence for any of them. He wanted to know what happened when you stripped it back. When you reduced the number of things competing for your attention to only the things that were genuinely essential. What he found surprised him. He found not deprivation but abundance. Not boredom but extraordinary richness of attention. He could hear things he had never heard before. Notice things he had previously passed without registering. Think thoughts that had never had enough quiet to complete themselves. He found that most of what he had been busy with before the woods was not life. It was the management of the appearance of life. This is the philosophy of less. Not minimalism as an aesthetic, not reduction as self-punishment, not simplicity as performance. But the genuine intellectual and spiritual discipline of asking what is actually essential and giving full attention only to that. The Stoics practiced this in a specific way they called subtraction. Instead of asking what can I add to make my life better, they asked what can I remove that is preventing my life from being what it should be. What noise can I eliminate? What obligation took on by accident can I honorably release? What habit is consuming time and energy without returning anything of value? What conversation am I having repeatedly that produces nothing? What are the things I own or maintain or manage that own and maintain and manage me in return? Seneca practiced this and wrote about it specifically. He described periods of voluntary reduction where he would deliberately strip away comfort and luxury to remind himself what was actually necessary and discover that it was much less than he had assumed. He found that in the reduction there was a kind of sharpness that excess had been blunting without his realizing it. His attention became more precise. His work became more clear. His sense of what mattered and what could be released without loss became more accurate. This is not about living in a cabin. Thoreau eventually left the woods. He said he left because he had other lives to live. The point was not the cabin. The point was the clarity that came from reduction. The question is not how can I become a minimalist. The question is what in my life right now is competing for my attention without earning it. And what would become available to me if I stopped giving it. Part 7. Focus as the final form of freedom. There is a story about the sculptor Michelangelo that may or may not be literally true but is philosophically exact. A visitor to his studio once asked how he had produced the statue of David. How did you make something so perfect from a block of marble? Michelangelo is said to have replied, "It is simple. I just removed everything that was not David." That answer sounds like a joke. It is actually a complete description of the creative process at the highest level. And it is a complete description of what focus actually is. Focus is not addition. It is not cramming more into the available hours. It is not trying harder or staying later or grinding through the resistance with more force. Focus is removal. It is the elimination of everything that is not the thing. It is looking at the marble and seeing not the marble but what the marble contains and removing with patient precision everything that stands between you and that. This is why focus is the final form of freedom. Because most people experience themselves as unfree in relation to their work. They feel pulled in too many directions, overwhelmed by competing demands, scattered across too many obligations to do any of them well. And they experience this as a problem of capacity. If only I had more time, they say. If only I had more energy. If only things would slow down enough to let me focus. But time and energy and the pace of the world are not what is actually at issue. What is at issue is elimination. The willingness to look at the full list of demands and say these are the ones that matter, those are the ones I am declining. The willingness to disappoint some people and some opportunities and some perfectly legitimate claims on your attention in service of giving complete attention to the claim that matters most. That willingness is where freedom lives. Not in having everything under control. Not in never being overwhelmed. In having made the choice about what actually gets your full self. Marcus Aurelius came back to this again and again in his journals. He described it as confining yourself to what is necessary. Not as deprivation but as power. Because the person who has confined themselves to what is necessary is not at the mercy of everything else. They have already decided. They are not negotiating with every new demand that arrives. They have drawn the circle around what matters and they stay inside it. This is not easy. Every ambitious person knows that the most painful thing about focus is what it requires you to say no to. The opportunity that is genuinely interesting but not the most important thing. The project that would be fun but would dilute the primary work. The relationship that takes without giving enough to justify the cost. The habit that feels productive but is actually displacement activity. Saying no to these things hurts. Not because they are bad, but because they are good, and you have to choose between good and essential. And that choice is where most people break. They say yes to the good thing, and the essential thing waits. And waits. And eventually the window for the essential thing closes without ever having been fully entered. Arthur the man from the opening of this story made a choice after the conversation with his friend. Not a dramatic choice, not a public announcement, not a new productivity system. He made one quiet internal decision. He was going to stop talking about the novel. Not to be mysterious, not to protect his intentions from the evil eye, not because he had read something about not sharing your goals. Because he had finally understood with full clarity that every conversation about the novel had been borrowed energy. Energy he had taken from the work and spent on the description of the work. He stopped talking about it. He started writing it. Not every day, some days he produced 2 sentences, some days he produced 2 pages, some days he sat down, and nothing came, and he sat there anyway. By the end of that year he had 412 pages. The talking had produced 11 pages in 11 years. The silence produced 412 pages in 12 months. Marcus Aurelius was not a perfect man. He knew it, and said so with unusual honesty in his private journals. He fell short of his own standards, he lost his temper, he allowed himself to be distracted, he made decisions he later regretted. But he returned. Every morning he returned to the same questions. What is the essential thing today? What can I release that is not essential? Where am I talking when I should be doing? Where am I planning when I should be acting? Where am I performing when I should be practicing? He returned to those questions not because the answers changed much, but because asking them daily was what kept him honest. Kept him clear. Kept him from drifting, which is the natural direction of every human life left without deliberate navigation. Seneca wrote near the end of his life a line that has traveled 2,000 years because it contains something permanently true. Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power. Not power over armies or empires or markets or other people. Power over himself. The power that comes from having decided what matters and actually giving it your full, undivided, unhurried, complete attention. That power is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not trend or go viral or get celebrated at dinner parties. It is the man who stops talking and writes the next page. It is the woman who stops rehearsing the difficult conversation and simply has it. It is the person who stops managing the appearance of focus and actually focuses. It is Herbie Hancock playing the wrong chord and watching Miles Davis turn it into exactly the right one because Miles was so completely inside the music that he could make anything work. It is John Woolman sitting in a room and letting silence say what argument could never reach. It is Joe Louis in a quiet gymnasium doing the work while everyone else was talking about the work. It is Michelangelo looking at a block of marble and seeing David inside it, and spending years removing everything that was not David. That is what true strength looks like. Not louder, not busier, not more, less, quieter, more precise, more fully present for the single thing that is actually in front of you right now. Stop talking. Stop overthinking. Start focusing. The work is waiting. It has always been waiting. Go. Please subscribe for more.